In today's deep dive, we look into an investment company that has professional athletes filing lawsuits accusing them of predatory practices. But before we take the deep dive, our quick five. One, Brad Pitt's new F1 movie makes a huge splash. Two, what Drake and pro sports have in common. Three, how the Browns have divided Ohio lawmakers. Four, more athletes are being recruited to run for office. Five, while Malik Beasley is under investigation. I'm Jason Kander, and I'm joined by Ravi Gupta. Adisu is out this week. Welcome back to The Game Within, where we talk about the business and politics of sports and how each shapes what happens on the field. Ravi, you want to take number one, or you want me to?
Well, I saw this movie over the weekend.
Okay.
Do you guys have Alamo Drafthouse in Kansas City?
We have stuff that's very similar. We have the concept.
I mean, what an experience. So I said to my buddy Jamie, who I was like, I never regret an experience at Alamo Drafthouse. It's like they have you don't drink, but they have like this incredible bar that's like horror themed. You can grab a drink and then you can take your drink with you to the theater where they also serve you dinner. And they have probably the best popcorn I've ever had in my life. It's just absolutely insane. So, and this was just a fun movie. It's not, this thing ain't going to win the Oscar, but it's just a classic underdog story. And, you don't really watch a lot of F1, right?
I don't, but I am excited to see this movie.
Well, it's fun because it takes advantage of this phenomenon in F1 that's a little bit like relegation in the sense that relegation in soccer, in European soccer, in the sense that the back of the grid has its own dynamics. So the people who are like the teams that are not that good have a lot of incentive just to be a little better than the other people at the back of the grid because there's a lot of money at stake. Like if you're finished 7th versus 10th as a team, because there are 10 teams, you get a lot more money when you're 7th than 10. And in some cases, that's what keeps the company profitable. For example, some of these companies are fragile. So it really takes advantage of that dynamic. So it's not like a movie about people at the front of the grid, which I thought was really smart. But the premise is preposterous, which is that a 60-year-old man could drive a F1 car competitively. I don't think anybody over 40
but
has
does he play 60, or does he play, do they age him down as a kid?
I don't think they give him an actual age, but they do have him racing like Senna and these people in the early 90s. So like it would have to be Pitt's rough age, and he looks like Brad Pitt. Like it's not like they make him look younger. And they have basically Javier Bardem plays the team principal, the equivalent of the coach. It's like coach / like CEO basically. But Bardem and him, like in the movie, were racing partners back in the day, and Bardem is old in the movie, so they're not even hiding the fact that Pitt is super duper old. Now, to their credit, for most of the movie, it's an interesting sports movie because for most of the movie, Pitt is not even meant to be trying to win. He's just trying to cause shit to help his teammate win. As the movie goes on, they do get more in the direction of him competing, but it was an interesting movie. It is nonstop entertainment, and they played within the rules, even though a 60-year-old could never win F1. Like they did play within the rules and use the rules to make it interesting. So it was a fun watch, and apparently made a shitload of money, is from what I understand.
Yeah, so it had a $200+ million budget. It's Jerry Bruckheimer and Joe Kosinski's movie. It brought in 144 million on its opening weekend, marking a pretty big success for Apple. F1 CEO Stefano Domenicali, I'll try it. We'll say its name is that. Praised the movie as a way to further integrate the sport and expand the fan base in America. The background on this is that in 2024, the sport reached about 30 million viewers across ESPN platforms, with an average of 1.1 million viewers per race during the season. The sport used to count viewers in the thousands less than 10 years ago. The F1 fan base across the world is over 800 million. Fan base in the U.S. is 50 million, but the really important thing is doubling year on year, said James Vowles, the head of Williams F1 and a former longtime Mercedes team exec. He said, so great trajectory commercially. And if we look at all of the partners and sponsors that we have, a third of them are from the U.S., which just tells you how important it is. There's also just some commentary here from Bruckheimer where he says that the audience in America, out of 20 people before a screening, one person raised their hand and said that they were aware of F1. At the end of the screening, everybody raised their hand wanting to watch a race. So that, I mean, from F1's perspective, it definitely accomplished the goal.
I mean, they've been killing it marketing wise. I mean, obviously they pioneered the Netflix shows that are now, we have a surfing one, we have a tennis one, we have golf, we have football. That's what got me into it years ago. And I watch it the way a lot of people watch golf. I kind of will put it on the background. You know, usually there are 2 stages to it. On a Saturday, they have what's called qualifying, which doesn't show up in the movie at all, which basically like determines your grid placement, which is actually where most of the most important stuff happens. And then you have the actual race. And not as much overtaking happens as you think. So the qualifying is really critical. Like if you're, and there are certain tracks where if you're first, you're basically going to win the race unless you have a mechanical failure. So that's really where a lot happens. But I think they smartly avoided that complexity. But they're bringing fans to this sport. And I've long told you this, I think in other venues, that I think F1 is a fascinating sport because it's really like corporations competing against each other because it's like product development, basically, you know, but you have constraints, you know, you have to make the car work to certain specifications, and they have a tight budget cap, which is the equivalent of like a salary cap, you know? So it keeps it relatively close. And it is a good time to get into it because there's a lot of movement now. Like you had Mercedes dominating for like 7 years, and you had 2 to 3 years of Red Bull. And now you got McLaren doing really well. And then you have, and every few years they change the specs, which totally changes who is going to be at the top of the grid. So the specs are going to change heading into next year. And so you have a lot of, there's this other phenomenon, which is a little bit mentioned in the movie, which is if your team is like losing early, you have this decision to make. Do I start investing in development of next year's car and kind of throw away this season? It's like the equivalent of tanking, but you can't tank too much because it's not like there's like a draft. You could start developing your car, but if the difference between a 7th place and a 10th place finish for your team is a lot of money. So you have to kind of stay competitive enough, develop your next car. So there's all kinds of like corporate strategy going on.
I haven't seen the movie yet. I will. Does it set it up like it's going to be a franchise? It must, right? I mean, if it made this much money, they're going to figure out how.
It's going to, it's what's interesting to me is that Pitt was awesome in it. Bardem was awesome in it. You can imagine those 2 guys are coming back. It's preposterous to think Pitt will come back as a driver. You know, it would be like Rocky, like the Rocky Balboa movies.
Yeah, the one nobody ever talks about.
Yeah. But he could come back as a team principal of another team competing against Bardem or whatever. The problem is they set this one driver up as like the future, and he's just not a good actor, in my opinion. I don't know his name, but the guy who is like with Pitt, like his like teammate, I just don't think he's that great. But there's a lot of people you recognize, like the mom, like the mom of the guy I just mentioned is the therapist from Ted Lasso. So you get a lot of people that you start to recognize. Like if you watch Killing Eve, like there's a guy from Killing Eve in there. So it's got a really great cast. You got to imagine if this movie continues its financial trajectory that they'll do more of these, and it's probably going to have an incredible international run too, given how popular F1 is around the world.
Well, the interesting thing is, from a business standpoint, you have 2 really interesting and not aligned groups here, right? Like Apple is a little bit notorious for being willing to spend a lot of money on films and go after prestige film and television, even without always having a game plan to make it profitable all the time, because clearly making films is not the number one way that Apple makes movies, right? So there's some prestige involved. So it looks like it's clearly going to earn out and do very well. But even if it didn't, Apple could probably handle it, and it wouldn't necessarily preclude Apple from doing a second one. And then for F1, the movie doesn't even have to do that well for it to be a huge boon to F1, right? Because you got to figure F1 doesn't have much, if any, financial stake in it. But what they do have is all sorts of positive back end and cultural relevance and all sorts of things to get from it. I mean, heck, even if all you had was the marketing campaign around the movie, it's a huge win for F1. So it's pretty smart.
Well, they filmed it in an interesting way too, because they followed the F1 season a couple years ago, and Pitt and all the actors filmed while F1 was going on. So if you were watching F1 a couple years ago, they would have the winners. They have like the champagne ceremony where they like splash champagne on each other on the podium or whatever. And then they would do a fake podium with Brad Pitt or whoever else on there. And
you would see it.
And then you could see in the footage that they use the stadiums, they use the jets flying overhead, the national anthem, the actual drivers, the other F1 drivers. There's actually no, other than Pitt and his teammate, everybody is a real F1 driver.
Oh, that's genius from F1's perspective. Because now you can go and decide to follow F1 and you just follow the characters from the movie.
Yeah, and like they don't really make them as like dominant as you'd think. They're kind of in the background. It's fascinating how they did it, honestly. And from what I gather, there was a lot of jockeying because nobody wanted to be the bad guy. And I think Lewis Hamilton, who's like the most acclaimed F1 driver, was the producer of it. And he's got his own rivalries, and those rivals, I think, viewed it with some skepticism. And you could tell Hamilton went out of his way to not involve those guys to make them like part of the race. So it's interesting. And it's fascinating that they were able to piggyback on it. Because I know that Jake Gyllenhaal did this with MMA, with the Roadhouse movie, where they also took advantage of a weigh-in or something. So it happens, but this I think is the most robust version of this we've ever seen.
That's fantastic. All right, well, I can't wait to see it. And it says a lot for it because I'm not an F1 fan, and I'm definitely going to see it.
If you like Brad Pitt and you like Javier Bardem, and I love both of them, it's a no-brainer. It's just a nice, feel-good, like, sports story.
Well, it's also it's a spectacle, and it's a spectacle, and it is a cultural event to some extent, and that's ultimately why I'm going to go see it. I will go see it in the theaters for the same reason that I saw Top Gun Maverick twice in the theaters, which is I know that this is one of those movies that it's a different experience in the theater, I'm sure.
Yeah, same people, by the way, same technology too. Yeah. They use the same technology in the cars that they use for Maverick.
So, all right, number 2 here. Drake's recent IG post showing off what may be fake or real abs has us thinking about athletes under scrutiny for their own body changes. Did you see this post? I saw
I did. Now, I'm not sure these are fake, so I don't want to.
Well, that's because you have abs. So
I do. Sometimes I do. I don't at the moment, probably, but you
probably do. The only time I've had abs was during COVID when I got so lean that it was like I can't keep doing.
My friend is actually his lawyer, and so I don't want to despair. And he's already doing like this libel case or whatever against his publisher. So look, I'm not saying they're real or they're fake. People are suggesting that they're fake, and I don't know if they're right or wrong, and nor should it really matter that much. But this made me think about this phenomenon of the off-season photo rabbit holes that we see, and we've seen a few of them this off-season. So Luka Doncic, a lot of speculation that he's lost some weight.
But there's no pictures, right? I haven't seen any pictures.
I think they have one out there.
Okay.
I think we're looking at one right now where he looks a little thinner. Apparently he gave up French fries, which, I'm like, there's part of me that's a little like unforgiving when you're a professional athlete and you can't eat right, and especially if you're very, very tall. Like I'm not that tall, and I'm not a professional athlete, and I'm like, I'm not like crazed. Like I eat pizza at least once a week, but it's like, the idea that if it's your job to be like in shape and you make $1 gazillion and you're like 6'6", you can't keep weight. Like that seems like alarming. On the other hand, if my job was to just run around all day, I would probably think I can get away with it.
You'd want to eat French fries all the time.
I probably think I can get away with it because anytime I ever do something like a tennis camp or something, I eat burgers and fries and pizza. So you got that one. You got Deebo Samuel, who showed up to the off-season workouts looking a little big and also slow. And that prompted Terrell Owens to weigh in with this commentary here.
He gonna do his thing.
Everybody keeps saying Deebo fat.
He is, man. What you think?
He just big bone, you know what I'm saying?
Nah, ain't no big bone. That's what you say when girls are fat. Hey, that's the term you use when you don't want to call a girl fat.
Oh,
you say they big bone. He about 2 chicken nuggets from being tipping the scale.
Oh my, all right.
Hey, Deebo, man, y'all know. I love Deebo. Hey, man, Deebo, we had a conversation.
Yo.
They know what the deal is.
So I just want to say we don't condone this misogynistic language about women. I actually hadn't seen that clip before it went on, so I don't like for any of our ladies listening. I don't
Sorry
agree
about that.
but yeah,
But yeah, I mean, some of this has got to be like, for Debo, like athletes age, and that's probably part of it too. But anyway,
yeah, I think the problem with Debo is he's like been a bit pushy about getting to the right place, getting the right contract, as anybody is, and so I think the combination of that and not showing up in shape allegedly, I think has turned some heads. And then there's this Giants third year wide receiver Jalen Hyatt, who showed up apparently a lot bigger than he was before. This one I don't really see. Like I'm looking at the photo now, I don't really see what it is. Like sometimes guys just lift a lot of weights. Like Keon Coleman, for instance, on the Bills was applauded for gaining weight this offseason.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a skinny guy, but it was like, but the coaches know, like the guy has been in the facilities, deadlifting more, yada, yada, yada. I think it's like, I think this phenomenon is interesting. I think that what I've noticed, especially in basketball, where I see this the most, Joel Embiid, I think, is famous for this, is that a lot of these are not trustworthy. Like, especially if the video or photo is showing the person in incredible shape.
Yeah, that's the worst. Is when
those
they're
are the
like,
ones you can't trust.
the thing like a few years ago where they had Travis Kelce walking on the the reverse, right? Where they're in incredible shape and for a human, right?
Yeah.
Like Kelce was on the beach like 2 years ago in the off season, and somebody took a picture and they're like, oh, and he was walking with Taylor Swift, and they were like, oh, dad bod. And it's like, no, actually, that's what an athlete looks like. Athletes don't actually look like Instagram influencers. That's because like a few minutes ago when I was saying like I was that lean during COVID, then I started playing baseball and I was like, oh, I can't hit the ball out of the infield and I keep getting hurt because I was in like influencer shape, and that's not the same as athlete shape, which is something to keep in mind.
Well, you know what's interesting about, then now you have the off-season videos too, where the people are training and things like that.
Yeah,
They're trying
like
to show
hype
whatever,
videos.
which I think is fine. Are you familiar with the Stephon Diggs video that was making the rounds? I can't remember if we covered this on this podcast. So he was on, he's dating some famous rapper. I forget who it is, but he was on some yacht in the off season. I think he skipped OTAs or something because he's injured. And he was apparently like, there was some kind of pink substance near him that people are alleging was like pink cocaine. Cardi B is who he's dating. People are alleging it's like pink cocaine or whatever. And all I was thinking to myself was, thank God I don't have this guy on my team anymore. He's such a distraction. And I've been listening to Bill Simmons, who won't even acknowledge that Stephon Diggs is on the Patriots because he knew right away. I mean, there are just some people who, he's like a Elon Musk type personality. He is just not satisfied unless he's hogging all the attention and is such a damn distraction, as talented as he is as a receiver. Yeah.
Well, the age-old how are people going to show up to camp thing has just been around forever.
Yes.
I mean, what's interesting, it's actually a relatively, like the last 20, 30 years, relatively new phenomenon that you're supposed to show up in great shape because training camp in football and spring training in baseball used to be when you got into shape.
Yeah.
There was no expectation. That's what it was for.
Yeah.
Now it's like for deciding who makes the team. But back then it was like, okay, we're all out of shape. No one's been exercising for months. Okay, better get the team together so we can get in shape for the season. And now it's
Did you play Pee Wee football, by the way?
Yeah, I played 7th and 8th grade football.
Man, I don't know if you had the same experience, man. All we did was run. Like, it's actually crazy. Like, I think about it now, and I'm like, with the metabolism I had and playing football for as long as I did, and then I would play basketball as soon as it was over. Sometimes I would overlap with basketball. I'm like, man, like, I don't even know what I looked like back then. I was skinny. I must have been just like, I could eat McDonald's every day. Like there's just.
Yeah. We ran a lot, but we also had a coach who just seemed to want to slam us into one another over and over.
Yeah,
and
we
over
had
again.
that too. Yeah.
We did a lot of that, All right, number 3, the Ohio State legislature has intervened in a dispute between the Cleveland Browns and the city of Cleveland, angering local officials. So in the Ohio legislature's recent budget negotiations, state lawmakers modified the Art Modell law, which is the law named after late Browns owner, and it was designed to prevent teams playing in publicly funded stadiums from relocating because as people will remember, Art Modell relocated the Browns to Baltimore, and they became the Ravens. So the law is to only tie teams to the state rather than the city in which they play, or that's the modification that lawmakers made, as opposed to it being to the city. Now it's to the state. The law blocks any team relocation without giving city officials 6 months notice and an opportunity to buy the franchise. And it became the source of competing lawsuits from the city and from the team in the city as the Browns look to leave Huntington Bank Field in downtown Cleveland. So there's a video here from last year from a Cleveland city councilman announcing their intent to use the Modell law to force the Browns to go by a legal process in order to leave.
What this basically does, ladies and gentlemen, is ensures that the Cleveland Browns have to go through the legal process of leaving the city of Cleveland, whether they want to move the team to Timbuktu or whether they want to move them to Brook Park or to Lakewood or to any other state. They have to go before the city, Cleveland City Council, ask for permission to leave that team or to move the team, or they have to give us 6 months notice and offer to put the team up for sale. We're hoping that the latter does not happen. However, this is going to ensure that the Cleveland Browns are going to be a part of the legislative process, and the Cleveland City Council is going to have a say-so in that.
So do I have this backwards? It's not the, is it?
The state is stepping in because
right.
basically they're staying within the same county, but they're going to leave the city.
Got it.
And so the state, I think it's Republican Dem politics. Like county, I think must be Republican. The city is obviously Democratic. It's Cleveland. And so the Democrats and the city officials are trying to force them to stay. I think they, not knowing enough. It's like whenever if the state steps in and changes the law, there's very little you could do as a county. Like you're basically, and you probably know this as Secretary of State more than I do, you're basically at the whims of your state. New York City is like this. New York City can't even raise taxes without permission of the state. So thank God, actually, because our taxes would be 150%. But yeah, so
it's a response to what the city was doing. The state is going, no, you can't keep them from doing it. And furthermore, the state put money into the new stadium project for them to move, it looks like.
Yeah.
And
this is always tricky, man. You think about the amount of stadiums that are not in their city, like Kansas City, is that in the city or is that over the border?
It's currently in Kansas City, Missouri. And we are in the midst of, like, within weeks, we will know where it's going to be.
Well, you think about how many stadiums, there's an incredible amount of stadiums. Just think about New York State. Like the New York Jets, New York Giants are in Jersey. The Bills play in Orchard Park, not Buffalo. You just can go on and on and on. It's pretty common for a stadium not to be in the city. Like all the Washington teams have at various points been in Maryland or Virginia, et cetera. So it is fairly common. But I understand what Cleveland, like their plight, and they have a tough history here, given the Browns had left already once before.
Yeah. So here's the back and forth. The Cleveland officials responded. They said, "We strongly oppose this legislative maneuver because Clevelanders have invested hundreds of millions in the Lakefront Stadium and surrounding infrastructure. This proposed change fails to protect communities like us when a team decides to leave." So the Haslam Sports Group, which owns the Browns, responded, said the General Assembly's amendment of the Modell law confirms that the law is intended only to prevent teams from breaking a lease or leaving the state. The Browns are doing neither of those things. The team is staying right here in Cuyahoga County, less than a mile from the city line, and HSG, which is Haslam Sports Group, will honor every commitment of the Browns' current lease. So then you have this funding controversy because the legislature on Wednesday passed the state's biennial budget, which includes $600 million in state funds that the Browns requested for their $2.4 billion Brook Park Stadium project. And here is a response video from an Ohio State Senate Dem.
But let's start with a provision in the new budget that lets billionaires build a new stadium using other people's money. The Republican plan is to tap into a pool of money that are unclaimed funds, which are things like consumer refunds or extra bank balances. These are dollars that tried to be returned to a consumer, but that consumer may not know they exist. The total of this fund in Ohio is $4.8 billion.
Okay. So first of all, great delivery.
Yeah.
So like it said, that money would be drawn from these unclaimed state funds. Former Democratic state leaders apparently will sue Ohio Republican lawmakers if they go ahead with their plan to use those funds to pay for the stadium and what plaintiffs are calling an unconstitutional and illegal funding scheme. So that's the lawsuit over whether or not the funds can be used.
Well,
for
that could have teeth then. That's different than just preventing them from moving.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost is urging Governor Mike DeWine to veto part of the state's budget bill that would designate the $600 million to a new Cleveland Browns stadium. So basically, they're saying, look, if you try and use the funds for this purpose, we are going to sue to stop you from doing it. So now the attorney general is advising the governor, like, hey, don't even sign that part of the bill because there's going to be a big legal fight over it. It's interesting. I mean, the stadium stuff is always an issue. And if you're, I don't know what the particular details are there, but I know that a lot of these teams, the decision they have to make is when you locate closer to the city or within the city, you are closer to, there's things that help you about that, right? You're closer to entertainment stuff. It's more likely, this is less of an issue for football because if you're the Browns, you're playing 8 or 9 games a year there.
Crazy. It's actually crazy that they build single-use stadiums just for football, like given how few games there are.
Well, and you end up with concerts there and all that kind of thing. But so there's a reason to co-locate near like a downtown because you have all the entertainment venue. You have reason for people to go. They're more likely to come to events there because they'll go to dinner and then go to the stadium. But then the other issue is like what's pushing a lot of these teams to consider the suburbs is oftentimes that's where a lot of your season ticket holders live. And so it's easier to sell season tickets when you're closer to them. It's oftentimes where a lot of the corporate headquarters are because a lot of corporate headquarters are moving out to, suburban areas outside of cities. And then it's easier to sell the suites as a result. So it is a real tension that it's not the only place where it's happening.
Yeah. And often, like, if you're just building a new stadium, this land is cheaper. It's like depending on what city we're talking about, it's harder to find land even there. Well, okay. Our story number 4 here is that, I think as is always true, every 2 years, we've got a concerted effort by both political parties here to recruit sporting figures to run for competitive seats. And I see baseball here, so I'm going to defer to you because I don't even know who this guy is.
Okay, so I know all about this. Okay, so and this is in Missouri too. So Democrats were recently trying to recruit former St. Louis Cardinals pitcher Adam Wainwright to challenge Ann Wagner in Missouri's 2nd congressional district. So I'll give you the rest of this news, and then I'll break down the district and the person here. So a public policy polling survey poll tested positive messages about Wainwright, providing a 3-sentence biography summarizing his baseball accomplishments, family life, and philanthropic endeavors, and asking if that was a convincing argument to vote for him. The survey then asked an informed ballot question again, testing Wainwright against Wagner. So it's like a benchmark poll. Wainwright responded that he likely will not seek the nomination. He said, with 5 kids going 5 different ways every day, Jenny and I stay incredibly busy as it is, not to mention the broadcast schedule with Fox and concert dates thrown in. Right now, I would not be able to spend the time needed to serve Missouri like they deserve, but we'll be praying for great candidates on both sides of the aisle to run so Missourians have great choices for their future, which is an interesting non-response about that. All right, so before we get into the Republican version of this, it was interesting when I first heard that Wainwright was considering it because first, the 2nd district in Missouri, so Ann Wagner has held that seat for maybe 10 years. Or maybe a little more. It is a suburban seat, suburban St. Louis. There have been 2 or 3 major attempts at unseating her. I mean, there have been lots of attempts at unseating her, but there have been 2 or 3 where there was like a lot of optimism ahead of time. One was my friend Jill Shoup, who I think listens to this show. So there's been a few. It is definitely a conservative leaning area. It's a suburb. And Ann Wagner has gone back and forth between being like a moderate. She's really like a corporate Republican. I mean, Ann and I actually, I wouldn't vote for Ann, but we get along well. Her husband he's been a government relations guy at Enterprise. I mean, they're very ensconced in that world. Now, Adam Wainwright he won 2 or 3 World Series with the Cardinals, and he is beloved because he is part of a triumvirate of 3 beloved Cardinals that kind of came in more or less together and more or less went out together. And that is Albert Pujols, Yadier Molina, and Adam Wainwright. The 3 of them were, like, for instance, when I think Wainwright may have played one more year than them. I can't remember. But or maybe I think they did all retire at the same time. But I know that Wainwright's last time pitching, like I think Pujols and Molina went out to the mound to like bring him out of the game, and it was a huge deal. It was just a couple of years ago, and so they are, the three of them are beloved in St. Louis.
And just for context, he would be running as a Democrat against her.
Yeah, and he's an interesting character. I mean, that was the idea, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think he ever said that, because I think he was trying to be careful because he still has like his broadcast career there and everything. But he's an interesting character too, because Wainwright has done things like, I can remember during USA Hockey, he would there were pictures of him and like, I'm a Royals fan, not a Cardinals fan, but I follow the Cardinals. So there's lots of stuff I saw that would really matter to local folks. He would always dress up in like tons of USA regalia and like paint his face in the clubhouse doing like USA Hockey stuff. And then there was a day, like I think the beginning of his last season, opening day, it was a surprise. They were like now singing the national anthem, Adam Wainwright, and like he stepped out of the like lineup of players, and you could tell none of his teammates knew it was coming. And in uniform, he sang the national anthem really well. Like he's an interesting guy, and is really well thought of in St. Louis. So it would have been an interesting race for sure.
Well, as we talked about, this is a storied history. Bill Bradley, famously was a New York Knicks basketball player and was a super accomplished senator. So like this happens, you have Tommy Tuberville. I wouldn't say super accomplished senator nor football coach, but seems to be failing up. So we have this phenomenon. This is pretty, what's the guy's name? Jack Kemp, the former Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is pretty standard stuff. And there's a halo effect from sports to politics for sure. And certainly like some common skills like leadership, just being tall and handsome, like these are just like, George H.W. Bush was a big collegiate athlete. I mean, these guys are like Gerald Ford, I think was also like,
which was ironic because then he was portrayed by Chevy Chase as like the least athletic, clumsiest man ever, which was unfortunate. He's probably the most athletic president we've ever had.
Right.
On the Republican side, following North Carolina Senator Tom Tillis's announcement yesterday that he would not seek
by the way, big news,
big announcement, and he would not seek re-election in next year's midterm elections. A senior aide to Senate Majority Whip John Barrasso tweeted this cryptic image of Dale Earnhardt's car. Earnhardt is a Kannapolis, North Carolina native, but has a mixed history politically. He spoke out in support of Black Lives Matter protests in 2020. He said, all Americans are granted rights to peaceful protest. Those who make peaceful resolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable, quoting JFK. North Carolina Senate race in 2026 is currently rated as a toss-up after Tillis's announcement, and former Governor Roy Cooper is expected to announce his candidacy. Other GOP contenders potentially include RNC Chair Michael Whatley, Laura Trump, House Rep Pat Harrigan, and proud Black Nazi Mark Robinson, which is just a funny thing.
We'd love to see a Robinson versus Cooper matchup here. Well, this isn't majority 54, but Cooper is a fascinating candidate for that race, about as good as you could hope for in North Carolina.
Yes.
Very popular. Very interesting. Let's go to story number 5 here. We've been covering gambling and sports for a while now. Talked about Pete Rose, for example. Now, Pistons free agent guard Malik Beasley is the subject of a federal gambling probe, and this has been surging within the NBA here. The allegations are from the 2023-2024 season when Beasley played for the Bucks, and apparently this is where I'm confused, Jason, and maybe you can help me out here. It had to do with a game on January 31st, 2024. And I'm going to read you this is from an ESPN story. The odds on Beasley recording fewer than 2.5 rebounds moved significantly at sportsbooks before the game, shortening from around plus 120 to around negative 250 due to a surge of action on the under. Beasley finished with 6 rebounds, so the over, and the bets that were deemed unusual loss. Now, my question is, what's the allegation? Because if all the action was on the under and he did the over, there are 2 things that are suspicious about this. One is the result was the opposite of the action, as it's written. 2 is the act that he took is the harder of the acts. So, like, theoretically, if you can get more rebounds, you will get more rebounds every game because it is a thing you should just want to do as an NBA player. It's like if there were like action on the over and you're like going to score a bunch of points or something. Yeah, like you could take more volume of shots, but that is the harder act to do. So they must have something smoking on this one because it does seem odd to me the way that this way is cuts.
Maybe he coordinated with the betting vendor, to put one sort of thing out there, and maybe I don't know, but this video, which is not of that, but there is this video that's been circulating now after this came out, which is, can we go ahead and play this?
A serious development for one of the NBA's top free agents right now. Sources tell me the U.S. District Attorney's Office is investigating Detroit Pistons guard Malik Beasley on allegations of gambling on NBA games and prop bets. I'm told it was during, allegedly, the 2023-2024 season. I have a quote from Beasley's attorney, Steve Haney. He said an investigation is not a charge. Malik is afforded the same right of the presumption of innocence as anyone else under the U.S. Constitution. As of now, he has not been charged with anything. I am told, though, that Beasley and the Pistons were in serious talks on finalizing a 3-year, $42 million contract that would have brought Beasley back to Detroit, but now those talks are on pause.
Okay, so that was obviously about it affecting the contract negotiations. Do we have, Philip, do we have the video that you had sent around in the text? Okay.
I can describe it.
Yeah, describe it, because I was like, oh my God, when I saw it.
Yeah, and I don't want to draw too much from it, but basically he lets a guy pass him.
I mean, egregiously.
But the thing is, like, it's hard to know context because you could find videos of LeBron James doing that. Like, there's just some people who take off certain plays at various
Yeah, that's
points.
true. That's true. But I mean, but it wasn't, I don't know. It didn't just look like he took it off. It looked like he was pretending to try. Like, that's what got me about that video. It was like, I mean, it would probably look like nothing unless you have the context of he's being accused of this.
Well, this is coming on the heels of Jonte Porter from the Toronto Raptors, who's banned by the NBA after a league investigation. I think that's Michael Porter Jr.'s brother. Mm-hmm. Earlier this year, Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier was under federal investigation as well for when he was playing for the Hornets. So this is happening, and we've been talking about this for a while, and our sort of prediction has long been that this is going to be something that we're going to see more of. And it's possible that this is a Pete Rose situation. I'm not sure it is, but like, if I'm right about the under over, maybe one explanation for Beasley is that he bet on himself. He knew there was action against him and he bet on himself. But that would seem like an odd thing for a federal probe.
I don't know. I think, obviously there's going to be more and more of this as a result of the proliferation of prop bets. And I know that they've always been there, but now that betting is everywhere, it seems, and you can bet on so many little things, you don't have to alter the outcome of a game. You don't have to go out necessarily and shave points or things like that to, mess with a prop bet. Just there's a lot more temptation out there.
Well, and everything I said aside, things like rebounds, assists, things like that, like, you could play the game a certain way to
just change your whole role in the game.
Yeah, rip rebounds out of your teammates' hands, pass and not shoot, shoot not pass, and those are just on things that make you look good on paper, and those are probably the kinds of things you want to do if you're trying to avoid scrutiny, instead of like the under on certain things, which I think is more suspicious if you're hitting the under on certain things.
Right, right. That's right. All right. So for our deep dive, an investment firm called Big League Advance has been called out for predatory practices and illegal loans. So the background on this is that San Diego Padres right fielder Fernando Tatis Jr. filed a lawsuit against Big League Advance Fund and Big League Advantage, citing predatory practices. BLA offers select minor league players upfront payments in exchange for a percentage of their future earnings in MLB, and claims to have signed over 700 players to partnership deals with interest in expanding to the NFL and NBA. While players interpret these as loans, they are classified as investments and have resulted in a multitude of lawsuits from players and from Big League Advance alike. So for background on this, we have like a background on the business model here.
So how does the Big League Advance business model work? The company offers teenage ball players a lump sum of money in exchange for a percentage of their future major league earnings. Fernando Tatis Jr. reportedly received $2 million when he was 18 years old, using that money to pay for things like top trainers and better nutrition. If Tatis or any other BLA player fails to make the big leagues, they don't have to pay the original money back. But Tatis did and now owes the company 10% of his pre-tax earnings, which means $34 million of the $340 million deal he signed with the Padres in 2021. That's a 1,700% return on BLA's initial investment, which Tatis's attorneys say is predatory.
This is kind of like reverse insurance, you know?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, my read on this is, in principle, like, if you get the numbers right, I'm not against this, right? Like, if the numbers aren't crazy on either side, the idea of giving somebody money and then like assuring them some kind of livelihood and then having that person like give you some kind of like percentage of your earnings is not crazy. And like some of the percentages that we're talking about here are roughly what your agent would get anyway without seeding you any money. So it's like, it's not nuts. The numbers feel a little tilted. And I would imagine in the lawsuit, how profitable this company is going to be critical, because obviously when you see a number like Tatis, that's going to seem crazy. How many other people are getting money as minor leaguers and then not earning a huge payout like Tatis? Are those numbers close, or are there way more earnings from the Tatis style people and then they're paying out to people who never make it to the majors? Those are the kind of numbers that I think are going to make or break this as a predatory scheme or not, because predatory has a specific meaning. Yeah.
Well, so here's the other detail that I think is the best argument for being predatory, which is that it appears that it has a large percentage of its clientele coming from South America, which would mean a large percentage of its clientele are people who don't speak English when they make these deals, right? So it's founded by former Phillies player Michael Schwimmer in 2016, and then it was expanded to target these minor league players, like I said, with a large clientele from South America. It uses an analytics department that tracks college talent for pro potential before courting them to sign a contract, mainly focused on baseball until recently. It wasn't until 2022, as BLA forged its expansion into college football and other sports, that it replaced the word advance with advantage. Schwimmer said he was late to realize the word was a synonym for loan.
Right.
That's how he said, that's how big of an idiot I am, he said, trying to be like self-deprecating. So we can get into the league's view on it, and then I have some sort of analogies to give here. But
what I was thinking of, Jason, is one that you and I have experienced, which is book publishing, where
that's a good one.
They give us money, and now
you don't have to pay it back if you don't earn out. That's the difference.
You don't have to pay it back. Oh, they have to pay the $2 million back if they don't earn out?
No, but I'm saying, but if you,
but
it's an advance, but it's like, and you get a percentage in publishing, you then later get a percentage of their royalties.
Right.
They're giving you in publishing, it's like they give you $10, and then as the book earns royalties, you don't get royalties from your book until you've earned $10 worth of royalties. This is the opposite.
It would be like as if the Yankees are the ones giving the $2 million to the player and then having some back, because it really, one could argue it is the publisher's money in the end that they're kind of sharing with you. But what I was thinking of is like the economics there aren't great for writers either. Now, writers aren't, as I would say, like, I mean, obviously there's some writers that are exploited, but by and large, it's not the same. The one I was thinking of is the boy bands. Like, if you follow Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, and all these bands, they basically were getting seeded this kind of money early. I think this happened to Mike Tyson. Like, I think for some people, $2 million is going to seem like a lot of money. Meanwhile, Lord knows what some of these, end figures look like.
So okay, a few things about this. One, you said it's like insurance. Yes, but insurance for this does exist. You can be a college athlete or, even a very promising high school athlete, and you can insure your athletic ability. You can take out a policy that's like, hey, if I get hurt and don't make it professionally, you give me $3 million. and I pay premiums to get to that point. And the insurance company is like betting, we bet that you won't get hurt. And you're like, I'm betting I will, just like life insurance or anything else. What this reminds me of is sort of three different things. One, there's such thing as a pre-settlement or pre-judgment loan. So I used to be a plaintiff's.
Yes.
So
yeah,
that's what it is. People will know this because they've seen the ads that say it's my money and I want it now. What those ads are is they're ads for something where, let's say you get in a bad car accident and you have a lawyer and your lawyer is making the case that it was the other side's fault and you're waiting on a big insurance judgment or settlement from the other person's insurance company, or it's against your employer or whatever it is. You can have, and let's say you don't have much money. Like now you're not having to pay your legal bills because you're usually working with a lawyer who only is paid like 33 or 40% if they win. So they're fully incentivized to be aligned with you. But let's say you're like a lot of people and you're like, I got hurt. I can't work. I'm waiting on this big judgment, but I need money right now. These companies, which many people will argue are predatory, not all of them are, but some you have varying different kinds of contracts, will come in and say, okay, we've evaluated your case. We think it is, pretty likely that you're going to get a settlement of at least X. So what we're going to do is we are going to give you this amount for now, but then we get, we have, sometimes it's an interest. There's interest that runs on that, which then you don't have to pay it off until you get your actual settlement. But what happens too often is people get their settlement or their judgment, they win, but it's taken so long and there's been so much interest that now all that happened is they owe money because there's been so much interest, they owe money to the company. And this sounds a lot like that. The under the table sort of black market version of this, which has existed for quite a long time, is Cuban players have fallen into this a lot. There are groups who will help get Cuban players either smuggled out of Cuba or they'll get themselves out of Cuba, but then they'll help them smuggle themselves into the United States, often via Mexico. And the deal that they make, which isn't legally binding because it's not
attached to a legal act.
Yeah, is that you're going to owe them, but it's much more like dealing with the mob, right? It's like, oh, well, I owe them 10% forever, or they'll hurt my family. And this has been happening for a long time. And then the last thing that it reminds me of that's not exactly right on is anybody who's ever been in the military, definitely the Army, will recognize the old trope that every officer is driving around in like a 5-year-old Ford Focus, and they tend to make more than the enlisted folks, but all the new enlisted folks seem to be driving new Mustangs. And that's because when you walk outside of the front gates of a major Army installation, Fort Leonard Wood, places like that, there's two things that you find usually within walking distance. One are payday lenders, and the other are auto dealers. And that's because these kids, the officers mostly have been 4 years of college by then. They're a little bit older, but these kids are right out of high school and they don't have to pay for housing, and they've got some money in their pocket for the first time. But while they're in basic and AIT, they can't go anywhere during basic. But when they're in advanced individual training, they can only walk. They can't have a car, and they got to go in buddy pairs. And so they'll locate right there, and then they will just be like, hey, do you want more money than is in your paycheck? Or, hey, you can totally afford on this interest rate that we'll give you. You can totally afford this Mustang. And so it's a very predatory practice. And these are young kids, many of whom are, in the baseball playing context, many of whom are struggling with English, probably have not been to college, are from South America, are, let's face it, probably not as well educated. Certainly about American finances, they're not as educated. And it just reminds me of it a lot.
Yeah, and it seems it depends on which state you enter into these agreements. So it seems like in the Tatis case, part of the problem was that they misrepresented whether they were licensed, but also that there is a Consumer Protection Act in the state of California that would have banned this. So, I think this is contextual. What's the financial arrangement? What's being disclosed? Is there any fraud going on? And are you in a state that has strong consumer protection laws? So it'll be fascinating to see where this goes from here.
Listen to some of these details. Okay, first of all, the MLB Players Association made it clear in a January 2016 memo to agents that it did not endorse or approve of BLA. The memo reportedly warned that future earnings the company sought from players was significant. The MLS Players Association, for instance, has described them as exploitative. Relatively young athletes, some of whom lack substantial education, might later regret contracting away what could become many millions of dollars. Listen to these details. As a 17-year-old minor leaguer, you know what's interesting about this, by the way, is that Tatis is Tatis Jr. because his father actually also played in the major leagues, but in an era where probably wasn't set up for life, and I believe returned to South America, if I recall. If I'm getting Tatis's origin correct, I can't remember. But anyway, as a 17-year-old minor leaguer, Tatis received $2 million from BLA in exchange for 10% of future earnings, his attorney said, meaning he would owe them $34 million. This was in the clip from his current deal alone. The suit also claims that BLA hid its unlicensed status from Tatis and failed to adequately disclose the deal's 90% annual interest rate. A 90% annual interest rate.
Well, that's got to be illegal, no?
I don't know, man. I mean, like, not all states have done that. And also, like, this is the thing where it's like, is it a loan? Is it an investment? If they've got themselves in investment territory, then I guess maybe they've gotten themselves out of whatever, California has in terms of the lawsuit filed in San Diego County Superior Court accuses BLA of using predatory tactics to lure him into an investment deal that was actually an illegal loan. BLA misrepresented itself to Tatis. We got into this. I mean, it's the impact. Okay. I'm fighting this battle not just for myself, but for everyone still chasing their dream and hoping to provide a better life for their family, Tatis said in a statement provided by a publicist. I want to help protect those young players who don't yet know how to protect themselves from these predatory lenders and illegal financial schemes. Kids' focus should be on their passion for baseball, not dodging shady business deals. So there's a bunch of other cases here. Franmil Reyes, BLA sued Franmil Reyes just last week for allegedly not paying 10% of his earnings, according to the lawsuit. BLA claims Reyes owes $404,000 in past due payments, plus $298,000 in interest on those payments. He also allegedly owes a yet-to-be-determined dollar figure for when Reyes played in Japan's Nippon League. BLA says Reyes hasn't made a payment since September 23rd, 2022, when he was a 21-year-old outfielder for the San Diego Padres single-A affiliate Lake Elsinore Storm in 2016. He and BLA signed an investment agreement in which BLA agreed to provide $301,000 to it. So let's get this straight. They gave him $301,000, and they're saying he currently owes them $700,000. In 2018, Francisco Mejia filed a lawsuit against the company after receiving a $360,000 advance. He said he was taken advantage of. He was 22 at the time. He received the money in December 2016 when he said he needed funds to pay for his sick mother's medical treatment. The terms of the contract call for BLA to receive 10% of his future earnings, a figure Mejia protects will cost him as much as $10 million over the course of his career, $360K to $10 million. After BLA filed a countersuit, he apparently dropped his claim and issued an apology. So I guess there's more to that. I mean, this is wild. The BLA,
I'm looking these guys up right now as you're talking. Man.
They're all very good players, and they are all from south of the border. BLA angle players, the complaint asserts, receive capital, not loans. They can use to, among other things, pay for food, housing, and training while working to secure a professional baseball contract. These funds can help players gain the resources they need to help make their dream of playing professional league baseball a reality. BLA also takes on some risk. That's nice of them. If the player fails to advance and never hits it big, BLA will have made a bad investment. Yeah, except you're making like 30x on the ones that do hit, at least. BLA expansion to college. Oh, good. After the 2021 Supreme Court ruling allowed college athletes to enter into financial agreements with NIL, BLA took the chance to sign Florida defensive star Javon Baxter. Baxter was one of 10 college athletes to sign with BLA. They contacted Baxter they contacted him via Facebook Messenger using a former college QB offering financial relief to the tune of over $400,000 at a time when he was on the verge of bankruptcy. They sought much more than the right to use Dexter's name, image, and likeness. They wanted a cut of his future income. If Dexter made the NFL, he would have to pay 15% of his pre-tax salary to BLA for the entirety of his NFL career. I consider that a predatory loan, said Chip LaMarca, a Republican member of Florida's House of Representatives. It would have violated our legislation when he left the university. BLA has temporarily limited its NCAA expansion as the lawsuit with the now Bears defensive tackle continues. So
I'm looking at their website.
Wow.
I'm looking at their website right now, and they have this interesting chart that basically lays out their business model as they want players to see it. And it basically says support, and then basically they're framing this as capital, analytics, philanthropy, and a business network. And what's interesting is they say they give upfront capital, and this is their language. They say BLA offers upfront capital in exchange for 1% of the athlete's potential earnings. So you're like, oh, 1%. The very next line, right, is they have these little like nodules. It says sliding scale and the percentage of the deal. The athlete chooses the upfront capital and the percentage between 1 and 15%.
Yeah. So basically, if you want any money that will actually make a difference in your life right now. Yeah.
And they're very clear to say it's not a loan. They say it multiple times on the website.
Now they do. But apparently with a lot of these deals, it was a loan. It came across as a loan. I mean, look, when you're dealing in interest rates, also, we don't even know to what extent these compound. It sounds like they may over a year. It may be a compounding interest rate, which is how you get to these. It sounds like it is, which is how you get to these massive numbers. So yeah, you've got it up here on the screen. So here's their business model. They identify the athlete through a proprietary algorithm, which okay. BLA offers upfront capital in exchange. Yeah, you got it right here for 1% of their professional earnings. Then it says sliding scale and the percentage of the deal. Yes, you're right. And then it says the athlete chooses the upfront capital. Secure future. The athlete uses the investment funds however they prefer. Not a loan. If the athlete does not reach the highest level of his career, they do not pay, which is it's careful how they're doing it there, right? They're saying not a loan as if it's a good thing, right? Like, hey, it's not a loan because if you don't make it, like, you don't owe us anything, right? Which is exactly like if you don't win your case, you don't owe us anything.
Bingo.
Oh my God.
Well, hopefully the agent, I mean, my sense is knowing the big agencies, they're probably dissuading their people from using this, but they might not get to the players in time.
But that's why they're focusing clearly on South America, because they're getting you before you have somebody looking out for you, which their proprietary algorithm is probably just that they're looking at the stats of, baseball in the Venezuelan league, and they're looking at all that, and they're looking at 14U baseball in like Colombia and stuff.
Right.
Anyway.
And it's kind of a bummer that a former player is doing this,
Yes, that's sick, isn't it?
Well,
anyway. All right. Well, this was something. This was a great episode when it comes to really so good job, Philip, really hitting the sweet spot of where sports and politics intersect. Like this is maybe one of my favorite episodes as a result. So all right. Well, I got to get out of here. I got to get true to a game. I got to go play.
Good luck out there, man.
Hope your wrist is getting better so that you can.
Yeah, I just went to the orthopedic doctor who told me I didn't need a cast, which was great. That I'm already healing, so that's good.
Oh, that is good. That sounds like something you would do. Heal faster than other people.
I'm trying.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. Sports really do matter quite a lot. Talk to you soon.